Alright, so, first things first, this is the Cygnus Loop. It is a real image, believe it or not. It is a real Hubble image. It looks like a star field that somebody just painted over, but no, it is a real Hubble image. Alright, so this video is more storytelling focused than science fiction focused, so depending on why it is that you watch these videos, hopefully you'll be satisfied, and if not, well, either thank you for watching or go ahead and watch something else, I don't mind. Context matters. So, and there is an associated Substack article for this, also titled Context Matters. And the idea is I have certain principles, certain standards, or standards based on certain principles, depending on how you want to look at it, for what content will make it into a story and what won't. Because it can be tempting to take certain kinds of content, put it in, and then take it to an extreme, because it can be, well, titillating. It is, like, even for the author, it's like, taking that and just going to an extreme with it. And yeah, I mean, it's I'm just trying to think what might be an example that people would be familiar with, but none is. I mean, one kind of is RoboCop, which I think is a movie I have talked about before on this. The copy I have is technically unrated because it's the director's cut, which is not that different from the theatrical. But in order to get the R rating, they had to remove frames. They had to do some careful re-editing because there is a lot of significant violence in there. There are reasons for it. Some of it is just the time period. When RoboCop was made, that kind of violence was allowed in Hollywood. It was accepted in Hollywood, and you could do that and just get an R. But some of it was also to establish stakes and some character development as well. And that's why context matters. So I'm going to use my own stories. Because this is stuff that does come up with my stories. Some of it is like, yeah, no, it's fine. There's nothing in the story that's a problem. But in some, no, it can be. So in The Children of Many Gifts, which is a superhero fantasy story, which right away, superhero fantasy, there's already an expectation of violence. So some amount of violence is contextually appropriate right away. Basically, a good guy's always going to end up punching a bad guy. That's just how that works in a superhero story. It's going to happen. Alright. So there's that level of violence. But it's like, you can just describe punching and kicking. That's fine. In The Children of Many Gifts, I had to take that to an extreme. Because I have one character who is introduced in battle, and I needed to establish very rapidly and very clearly he is evil. How did I do that? I have him mutilating his opponents. I mean, seriously, he mutilates them. He doesn't need to either. He could just kill them very effectively, very efficiently, very quickly, all that. But he chooses to play with them and to mutilate them. It's because you're not supposed to like the guy. So that makes it contextually appropriate and also necessary. The necessary is also important here. Because it is the fastest and most efficient way to introduce and establish certain aspects of this character. And by the way, in this battle, there's other characters that are similarly introduced right then. So in some cases, I can have their language introduce them and establish certain aspects of the character quickly. But also some way it's like, no, it's going to be more so their actions. Or it's a combination of the two. I mean, it's even with the other character, it's a combination of the two. But he starts off not speaking at all, and then he does end up speaking. So it needs to be his actions that first set the impression. Whereas, actually, just a certain reflection, a certain mirror there just occurred to me, where this character is related to another who, how he is first introduced, is in fact talking. Not in a fight, he's talking leading into a fight, whereas this guy is fighting, and then he eventually starts talking. I just realized that's actually very, very good mirror there. It really is. Anyhow, I'm sorry. Total aside here, which means I'm going to be stuck with this recording. Total aside is I do like when I realize after the fact that something I wrote works actually very well. It's like, I didn't realize that's actually perfect. I would choose to do it that way, but it just wrote that way. So cool. I love it when the story tells me to do stuff and it works out so well. Anyhow, so yeah, contextually it was appropriate and necessary for having the character do that. And it is also that is true to the character. To be fair, it's like the character is evil. He's going to do this. He reappears later in the book, though, for another fight, another battle. In that, he doesn't mutilate, or at least I don't bother describing any of it. I mean, technically his attacks could mutilate his opponent, and would certainly be devastating. Actually, no, now that I think about it, he does technically mutilate one opponent. But it's toned down. It is not nearly as explicit as it was before. Why? The character was already established. It was unnecessary there. Still contextually appropriate. It's still the same evil son of a bitch. Which, that contextually appropriate there, because it's like, no, this is a really bad guy. So my use of that term, even though that would be under the category of foul language, it's like, he's a bad guy. Describing him that way makes sense. So yeah, it's all contextual appropriateness. That really does determine for me if I will include such content. And also in that story, there's one character who has to unleash a very powerful attack. And it had occurred to me that because, against this evil guy who's so powerful, it had occurred to me, let me step back and tell it a little differently. And it was on this finger, one of the types of content that it has to be contextually appropriate is sexuality and nudity. Okay? Well, sexual content and nudity. There is one place where I can definitely think of nudity that would be present in a non-sexual way that would be potentially appropriate and, well, necessary as well for establishing certain things. That's in horror stories. You know, the idea of, like, you are running and the only way you can escape from the monster would involve, like, your clothes being torn off, or even just you were partially dressed at the time and you just have to run. There's a scenario in the Children Many Gifts where I considered allowing that, where I considered doing that, but it's like, no, because it's not set up properly. It is contextually appropriate-ish, but it doesn't quite, it's not like there's a setup that it's that serious. It's not that, well, no, it is that serious, but not set up that this would occur such that it makes any sense to have that there. But I did think about it, and I really had to weigh on, is this appropriate or not? And I decided it was not, because there's no reason to so expose that character. There's no reason to, really, it was just, there was no reason to expose that character. And as I said, there was no setup. There's no setup of such exposure for any character. Now, I do still describe that the character's clothing is damaged by what's happened, but not in a way that would be exposing, because it was not contextually appropriate. Which is also, I had another way of achieving the same goal, which was just to describe later that the clothing was damaged by the attack that they had to do against the monster. And that is also then part of it. Is it's somewhere between, is it necessary and is it contextually appropriate? Can it be achieved by another means? Having the dude mutilate, it is kind of the only way to establish just how evil he is. By having him commit evil acts. Because, you can say somebody's evil, that doesn't mean they are. Even as an author, in fact, I do have some stories in mind where there was a character who the majority of the world would say he's evil. But in many ways, he isn't. But he does. The funny thing is, he actually takes advantage of that. He tries to continue that persona because he can control certain things that way. It gives him a certain kind of power that he does want. It's actually desirable for him. It's not great, but he is able to work with that, so he's actually okay with it. But still I would be writing a significant amount describing him as evil, but in reality he isn't. So even the author you can't necessarily trust is always telling you the right thing when it's just talking. It's the actions that matter. So for setting that evil character as being evil, had to do with actions. I'm just trying to think if there's anything. I do have the article up that because I've already written it. It's not gone live. I don't know when it will. For the Substack. I just want to, I don't want to get into, I write more in there about sexual content. I don't feel like talking through it in YouTube. But I do think that if you want to see more of what I wrote, and also I do talk more in there about the, I don't remember, because I've already tried to record this twice before, so I don't remember where I said what. But I do believe that content is, I'm pretty sure I would have said this, I do believe content is, you can have whatever content you want in your story, you can. But curation, I also fundamentally and firmly believe in. So by that I mean, Just because you wrote it doesn't mean it needs to be in anybody's collection. Doesn't mean anybody needs to buy the book. Trust me, I know that nobody buys mine. Although you can. And my brain just turned off. I hate it when it does that. But it's also like with libraries as well, because that is a discussion. It's like libraries fundamentally still have the responsibility to curate their content. And sometimes that can just mean having it on the right shelf, having it in the right section. And in other cases, it can mean that certain content is there, certain content is not. That's all curation and is also about responsible curation. So I mentioned RoboCop in this. Yes, that was this recording. I like the movie. I fully intend, if I ever so fortunate as to have kids, I will show it to them at some point. They're gonna be grown at that point, though. That's a very violent movie, and it is rated R for a good reason. I agree with that. So that would be I'm keeping that hidden somewhere. So they would not have easy access. That would be my curation of based on the content. Absolutely, I would do that. But then I've got another. It's funny. I have it right next to it down here. The physical media is just sitting there. But The Last Starfighter. That one, yeah, technically there is some violence in it. In fact, there is at one point some mutilation. But it's establishing that this one character is evil by his actions, not just his words. But that, I actually would be comfortable with that just sitting out. I mean, maybe not younger than 10 years old, but older than 10, I could see it where it's like, yeah, I don't mind if, if a kid would have just grabbed that and started watching. Well, my kid. I can't speak for anyone else's kids, but it's like, there is that element of, yeah, you can do that. It's like, that's also the kind of curation I mean, even within your collection. So, and it's actually funny. I think the same background here, the Cygnus loop, is used in a different video of mine, talking about passing down culture and how I don't really like how some of the options are today for streaming stuff. I'm pretty sure I go into all that. That is quite a thing that I wrote up. Unfortunately, I did that a while ago, so I don't completely remember it. But it is part of it is that idea of I can consciously decide what is shared because context does matter, and curation is important. And it's different video that I recorded a while ago, but I'm happy with how it is, and different article which I wrote a while ago, but I maybe write that one. But yeah, I just did want to make that point because he's. I guess another way to put it, I don't know if I would be described as a free speech absolutist, but just as much as you have the free speech to write whatever you want in a story, it is also everybody else's free speech to not read that story, to not purchase that story, to not lend that story from a library. That is also there. And it's weird how they do seem. I hear stories about some people, like real stories, not written stories, that seem to suggest that there are people out there who think that because they write it, that means people should read it. It's like, no, that's not how any of it works. Yeah, I guess I should also make that point. I'm just seeing what I can of the article. Part of it with going back to the content, I had this concern that I think some people will include content, like what I've been mentioning, to be edgy. To like go up to the edge and see what it's like. Why? I mean, I'm not. That's not really a rhetorical question. I mean, it is because no one can reply, but except in the comments. But I just mean I don't see a value to being edgy. And how I actually do end the article is talking about. I mean, it's true. Sex sells. There's a reason why that is a statement, but that's also very shallow. So is being edgy for the sake of being edgy, or thinking you're edgy when you're not. That's all shallow. I don't want any of my stories to be shallow. So it's like if it's there, there's a reason for it to be there. RoboCop, there's a reason for the graphic violence there. Some of it was because they knew they could. It's like it's kind of the style of action movies of the 80s. But it was also, it establishes some really bad people that they are okay with that. They tolerate that because they're that bad. They are that evil. They are that amoral. So, yeah. I mean, how I even end it here. The thing is, well, oh yeah, because I talk about how part of the reason you include this content, like the violence, is to be provocative. And I will try to end this soon, which could still mean I go for 10 minutes. I'm sorry, it's how I am. It's like using that mutilation example in the one story. That's to be provocative. I wrote it that way to provoke people to find the character evil, but it is to provoke a reaction. And there's nothing wrong with that. Stories by their nature are going to be provocative. But is the provocation shallow? Which, as I was just saying before I got to this one, and it's like sex sells. Yes, that is provocative, but it is shallow. And as I have it written here, the thing is, provocation can be shallow. Sex sells, though accurate, is an example of basic titillation, and that cheapens a story. I care about my stories. I don't want them to be cheap. I want, if it's there, there's reason for it. There's depth to it. Some amount of depth to it, at least. So yeah, I just wanted to make this video and obviously have that article to just share that, because maybe there's somebody out there who's going to read the article, watch this video, and is wondering it's like what they can do. Or maybe they're thinking like, yeah, throw all this in them. Maybe you'll read this or watch this and be like, maybe I can tone down a bit and, make it more accessible, make it more approachable for more people. But you don't need to compromise anything. You can find alternatives. Or maybe it is. Your story needs it all. Good for you. I mean, that's for that is your decision to make. This is my decision. This is the standard that I am keeping, that it must be contextually appropriate. It must be necessary. If it fails those, won't include it. But that's my standard. If you want to have a different standard, go for it. Good for you. Yeah. I know this one is this is a weak video, I know, but it's I want to also have the video. I want to try for some of these articles have a matching video ish. But in any case, we can wrap this one up now. I shall see you next time. Link to the Substack itself, not the specific articles, in the description, because hey, YouTube's letting me do that. And I guess talking about YouTube, I should also say like the video and subscribe if you liked it, and if you want to subscribe. If you don't, I understand. Same thing with the Substack. If you want to subscribe there, cool. All right. I think I'm through embarrassing myself. See you next time.